What's up everyone? I'm going to show you how to build this bookcase. So first I draw everything up in SketchUp. Since this is all made out of plywood and edge banding, it's pretty straightforward, and I just use this to figure out my cut list. I start by breaking down 2 sheets of white oak veneered 3/4 inch plywood. Because I'm lazy, I try to avoid doing as much work as possible on the floor. Do everything at the table saw. So here I'm doing the long strips, the horizontal strips that are about 53 inches or so. Cutting everything to rough size right now. So the design calls for 1.5 inch thick pieces. Can't really find 1.5 inch thick plywood, so you glue up 3/4 inch plywood together and add it together, and there's 1.5 inch. Here I am laminating pieces of plywood, and I might have been a little bold trying to do all of them at the same time with pipe clamps and too much glue and things dripping, and just, it was really hot and all sweaty, and it was just a freaking mess. But I got it done. Here are the clamps. I might have started to go a little overboard after everything got flushed up, but I guess you can never have too many clamps, and it's a pretty important glue up. Enjoy this clip of me clamping things. Now once the glue is dry, I can trim the edges where the glue squeezed out and, you know, the little rough edges and whatnot to the final width. And it makes a nice clean square edge, and everything is going to be all flush and pretty and smooth. Now I'm cutting down some solid white oak. That's going to be the edge banding to hide all those nasty plywood edges. Just making sure that I mill everything flat, square, and pretty easy to work with. All good stuff. Once everything was milled flat, I ripped the strips of white oak to a hair thicker than I need, which you'll see later when I flush everything up. And here's where I ran into a little bit of a pickle, because at first I wasn't going to add anything to the sides of the plywood, and I was just going to trim it square on the edge. But that was not going to look very good if you looked at it from the side, so I decided that I was going to add some miter edges of white oak. That's going to take a little bit more time, a little bit more steps, but you know, it's going to look better. So now I'm trimming to size the horizontal strips, being very careful not to tear out the oak veneer. I'm setting up a stop block to make sure all the pieces are uniform length. I have to measure because my scale on my T-track is not accurate, but you know, that's why you measure, right? Oh look, 53.5 inches. That's what we want because we're gonna add 2 pieces of edge banding on the sides. They are 1/4 inch. 3/4 inches, and that would make it 55, which is the final dimension. Everything's all cut, squared up, and just enjoy running my finger over the nice clean square edges. After carefully setting up the proper lengths with a stop block and measuring, I cut the miters on the long pieces. This part gets really tricky, but you know, just take your time, measure 3-4 times. It's, you know, miters are a headache, but they look nice, so it's worth it, right? This is where leaving things a little extra on the width comes into play. With the glue up, you have a lot of extra room and some slack to have some glue squeeze out and to trim things up, because you want to be able to trim your hardwood flush and not hit the plywood veneer, because you'll just tear right through that and it would be ugly and not fun, and it's a pain in the tuchus. Now here's where a little math and planning ahead works in my favor. This is going to be the vertical divider of the shelf, but I'm able to get 3 pieces out of this. When I trim it to the proper height, it will also trim the edge banding, and it saves a lot of headache trying to flush everything up on the sides with your fingers. Just by having things oversized, it helped with cutting down the plywood and also attaching the edge banding. As I set this up and I let the glue dry, I get the miter corners on the horizontal pieces ready. And because it's on the side and it's not really going to show, I opted for brad nails here. I just take a jack plane and flush this guy up. And look at all those pretty shavings. Hate to throw those away. On the oversized miter edges, I just take a flush trim saw. That's what it's called, right? Now I take the vertical dividers, and because they're oversized, I'm able to trim them up nicely on the miter saw. I set up a stop block, get 3 pieces out of 1 glue up. Take a step back, look at all the pieces of this bookshelf that are gonna eventually come together somehow, and a lot more work ahead. Just double counting to make sure everything's there. But they're all flush, they're all ready for joinery and assembly, and let's get started. Stack all the pieces on top of each other in a rough layout of where they're gonna go. And it's at this point in time that I wish that things just stayed where they are when you put them like this. Because I'm thinking ahead about all the dominoes I gotta cut. Since I have a plywood square edge in the back of the bookcase, I decided to use that as a reference point against all the pieces of where I'm gonna cut my dominoes. It saves a lot of headache of trying to measure from one edge of all the pieces. So I just clamp them together, mark a line on the back of where they're gonna go, bring that line across. It's just gonna make things so much easier when I have to cut the dominoes. With a clamped square on the line that I mark, I use the domino fence and the little reference doohickeys that are on the domino just to make my life a lot easier. These joints are gonna be plenty strong for this purpose. I put 2 dominoes, well, 4 I guess, on the vertical pieces using the same reference doohickeys on the domino, and everything matches up. And here's me dry fitting. It's showing just that. Everything matches up. How fun. Oh baby. Oh baby. With everything dry fit, I clamp them together so I can sand all the edges nice and flush with each other. For this project, the client wanted a whitewash oak finish, and I opted for Rubio Monocoat White. I'm really enjoying how the oak is taking this finish. When it's all put together, everything looks really nice. I'm adding leveling feet to the bottom of the bookshelf because things are never level, especially in a New York City apartment, but that's why you add leveling feet. Pretty simple thing to add. Well, we're in the home stretch now. There's 8 glue ups that have to happen with this, and they're all the same. Pretty straightforward. And I'm not gonna show you all the glue ups because that's just really boring. I was pretty bored doing it, so you get one. Enjoy it. These things are pretty heavy, and by having them in 2 different pieces, it made glue up pretty straightforward. It's also going to make transport and installation a whole heck of a lot easier, and it just makes sense. They're countersunk and screwed underneath that top middle shelf, if you know where I'm putting my fingers in right now. There it is in all its glory. I hope you guys like this video. please like, subscribe, you know, do all that fun stuff that people do for YouTube. Thanks for watching, guys. And as always, here's a Trev for scale. That's a lot of books.